Good day, everyone, and welcome to our second session in Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person. For today's lesson, we will be talking about the beginnings of doing philosophy. The act of doing philosophy necessarily involves the act of asking questions, contemplating about the mystery of life, and constructing arguments and be able to rationally evaluate them in the end. In other words, doing philosophy means to ask questions, to reflect, and to formulate and evaluate arguments. In this way, we could say that one does not necessarily have to be a graduate of a philosophy degree in order for her or him to do philosophy. Why? Definitely because anybody can do philosophy as long as she or he raises valid or intelligent questions, reflects, and argues in a logical manner. For better understanding of the beginnings of doing philosophy, it is good to answer the question, when do we begin to philosophize? According to some of the philosophers, we begin to philosophize in the different circumstances or situations in our life, particularly in times of first wonder. To philosophize is to wonder about life, about love and loneliness, birth and death, about truth, beauty, freedom, and so on and so forth. In other words, to wonder means to realize that there is something strange behind the things that we are ordinarily perceive. To wonder is to notice something extraordinary in the ordinary things we see. Second, doubt. It can also impel human person to ask philosophical questions. Descartes' philosophy started from doubting the existence of everything. It means that the more doubts we have, it provides us to ask different questions in life. It may include doubt in terms of our identity, our flexibility, and even our own worth as a human person. Third, in times of limit situations, these are inescapable realities which we cannot be changed but only acknowledge. So like for instance, failure or even death of a beloved. We may not be able to control them, but we can control our response to them through reflection. In other words, these kinds of situations may provide opportunities and challenges for us to make life meaningful through meditative reflection. Fourth, metaphysical uneasiness, which is considered as contrasted with curiosity. To be curious is to start from a fixed external object which we have a vague idea of. In other words, it is beyond the physical, the external, and it is more internal. What does it mean? Metaphysical uneasiness could be our hesitations, suspicions, or even our beliefs, which we could not explicitly express and lead us to ask different questions in our life. Before proceeding to the next part of the lesson, let us try to make a short summary of what we are talking about. Whenever we will be asking the question, when do we begin to philosophize? We could say that it begins in times of wonder. ang sitwasyon kung saan tayo ay namamangha sa kung ano ang mga nagaganap o nangyayari sa ating paligid o maging sa ating sariling pagkatao. Second, philosophizing also happens in times of doubt. Sa tuwing nalalagay tayo sa sitwasyon na nagkakaroon tayo ng pagdududa, lalo tigit sa larangan ng pag-iral ng lahat ng bagay sa daigdig, kabilang na ang mga bagay na hindi natin agad maipaliwanag. Besides, philosophizing also begins in moment of limit situations. Panahon kung saan nagaganap ang mga pangyayari na hindi natin kayang pigilan, tulad ng kamatayan, pagtanda, o maging pagtalikod sa atin ng mga taong labis nating minamahal at pinagkakatiwalaan. Sa pamamagitan ng mga pangyayaring ito, ay nakabubuo tayo ng mga tanong sa ating isipan at siyang nagiging daan upang magkaroon tayo ng mas malalim na pag-iisip o pagninilay. Lastly, in times of metaphysical uneasiness, sitwasyon kung saan hindi tayo mapalagay, nababalisa, nababagot, at tila di matagpuan ang kahulugan at kahalagahan ng buhay. From there, we could say that philosophy will give us holistic perspective on things. Perspective is the manner by which we view things. It could be in a positive way or it could be in a negative way. So let's try to look at the following pictures. This picture could be viewed in two different ways, especially by seeing the two sides of the story. So, let me show you. Tingnang mabuti ang larawan na nasa inyong harapan at titingnan natin ang kabuuan ng larawang ito sa pamamagitan ng mga susunod pa. Okay, let's try to look at this perspective or at this point of view. So, kung titingnan natin, maaari nating masabi na napakasama ng taong ito sapagkat tinututukan niya ng baril ang walang kalaban-labang tao. Subalit, the story does not end with that image. Ang kwento ay hindi nagtatapos sa pamamagitan lamang ng isang bahagi ng imahe. Bakit? Sapagkat kung titingnan natin ang kabilang bahagi ng kwento o kabilang bahagi ng larawan, makikita natin na mali pala. Hindi pala masasamang tao yung dumakip sa kanya. Kasi sa larawang ito, nakikita natin na pinapainom siya ng tubig. Ang kaawa-awang binata or ang kaawa-awang lalaki ay binibigyang lunas at ang kanyang uhaw ay pinapawi sa pamamagitan ng tubig. Before engaging in philosophical inquiry, one must be able to distinguish between a holistic and partial point of view. This is critical for anyone doing philosophy because it sets a limit in coming up with conclusions about a given situations. So let us now deal with the difference between holistic perspective and partial perspective or point of view. Let us first have the holistic perspective. It examines each component part and how it is connected with other component parts to form a cohesive whole. It also focuses on the bigger picture rather than on the finer details. Ibig sabihin, kapag daw pinag-uusapan natin ang holistic perspective, ito ay tumutukoy sa pamamaraan ng pagkilatis at pagtingin hindi lamang sa maliit na bahagi ng sitwasyon o pangyayari sa ating paligid o maging sa buhay ng tao. Sa halip, ito ay nakatuon sa kabuuan ng pangyayari, so that at the end, we may not jump into conclusion without further analysis of or investigations and abstractions of what had happened. The next is partial perspective. A partial perspective only focuses on certain aspects of the whole, so much that the whole is ignored. For better understanding of the difference between the two, let us have the comparison. Holistic perspective looks at all aspects of the given problem or situation. Ibig sabihin, ang lahat ng bahagi or lahat ng aspeto ng problema at ng isang sitwasyon ay ikinukonsider, sinisiyasat, sinusuri, at tinitingnan. On the other hand, partial perspective looks at only a limited number of aspects of the given problem or situation. So like what I have said before, partial perspective is actually the opposite of holistic perspective. So, maliit na bahagi lamang or maaaring isa o dalawang bahagi lamang or aspeto ng problema ang tinitingnan under partial perspective. Furthermore, in holistic perspective, all aspects are given importance when making conclusions. All aspects are tied in together to form a general overview of the problem or situation. In other words, lahat ng aspeto ng problema ay sinisiyasat, kinukuha, tinitingnan, pinag-uugnay-ugnay upang makabuo ng isang konklusyon. Meaning to say, it does not jump immediately into a conclusion without that analysis and observation of the problem or situation. While partial perspective conclusions are made based on considering some, but not at all sides of the situation. For example, in holistic perspective or holistic point of view, a teacher listens first to both stories of her two arguing students before making any conclusion about the issue. Parehong pinapakinggan. May nag-aaway na estudyante, walang pinapanigan. Parehong tinitimbang ang sitwasyon or ang pangyayari bago bumuo ng isang konklusyon. While in partial perspective, a teacher scolds student A after student B accused him of stealing her ballpen, for instance. However, the teacher only listened to the story of student B and not to student A before deciding to scold the student. So, you see the difference? Sa holistic perspective, pinapakinggan ang dalawang panig bago bumuo ng konklusyon. But in partial perspective, maaaring kung sino ang unang lumapit, sino ang unang nagkwento, nagsumbong, or nagbigay ng impormasyon, maaaring siya ang panigan. Maaaring ito ang tingnan para makabuo ng konklusyon. So that's the difference between holistic perspective and partial perspective. Another example, which is very timely, itong panahon ng pandemic, wherein we are engaged ourselves in what we call new normal. Okay? Yung new normal ng paraan ng pagkatuto ng bata, yung tinatawag nating online classes. From the very beginning, ang dami nating haka-haka, ang dami nating suggestions, ang dami nating comments, and so on and so forth. But the question is, looking at that situation, paano natin to tiningnan? Do we use our partial point of view or do we use the holistic point of view? Kasi pwede natin itong tingnan sa dalawang magkaibang pamamaraan. Una, kung ang paiirali natin ay ang pagtingin lamang sa negatibong epekto, dulot, or negatibong impact ng online classes, ibig sabihin, we used only our partial perspective. Ang hirap naman ng online. Ano ba yan? Ang teacher, pasa na lang ng pasa ng gagawin. Hindi naman ine-explain. Ang pangit. Ayoko nang mag-aral. Tweet dito, tweet doon, post dito, post doon, na walang learning kasi ang estudyante more on passing requirements. That is partial perspective. Kasi ang nakikita lamang natin ay ang masamang epekto, ang masamang bahagi ng isang sitwasyon. While on the other hand, if we will try to look at it using our holistic perspective or holistic point of view, pwede nating matimbang ang sitwasyon. Pwede nating maisip, if I would be a student, na hindi lang ako ang naghihirap, hindi lang ako ang nahihirapan. Kasi, nandito tayo sa sitwasyon na ito. We do not choose to be in this situation. And this situation is actually part of what we call limit situation. May mga pangyayari sa buhay natin na hindi natin mababago. But we have to acknowledge it through the use or through having this holistic point of view. Huwag agad mag-react, huwag agad mag-comment, huwag agad magbigay ng opinyon base lamang sa kung ano ang iyong nararamdaman, base lamang sa kung ano ang negatibong iyong nakikita. Philosophy teaches us to develop this holistic point of view and to develop this kind of perspective on looking at things. Kaya nga, in our first discussion, anong sabi sa atin ni Frederick? That philosophy is a vision. It is a new or it is a way of looking at things in a new perspective. Tingnan natin ang isang bagay sa makabagong pamamaraan or sa bagong paraan. Okay? I hope you learned something. I hope you see the difference and you understand the difference between holistic perspective and partial perspective. To conclude, we may say that holistic perspective will lead us to the truth. Doing philosophy does not end in understanding what is meant by doing philosophy or identifying or knowing when do we begin to philosophize. Rather, we have to understand doing philosophy also by knowing the different philosophers who were known as the presocratics. So when we say presocratics, these are the philosophers who emerge before Socrates. And in this part of our lesson, we may know each one of them. But beforehand, let us see that the importance of this first group of philosophers known as the presocratics should not be underestimated. In fact, many of the popular ideas today had their roots in presocratic philosophy. The important questions in this part of our lesson would attempt to explain what are the ideas or important contributions of presocratic philosophy to the discipline of philosophy today. It has been a very long journey since the beginning of Western philosophy, dating back to 630 BC in Miletus. So in our previous lesson, it was mentioned that Miletus, as a fishing village and center of trade and commerce in ancient Greece, was the ideal place for the first practice of philosophy to emerge according to Curd. It became the melting pot of ideas from other cultures in other parts of the globe, together with the shrewdness of businessmen going in and out of Miletus. It was part of ordinary life to hear people trying to voice out their opinion and convince others through argumentation that their opinion is the most plausible one. The best example of it is no other than Thales, who was known to have brought back geometry from Egypt, where he would travel for his olive oil trade. Thus, the Milesians were exposed and became tolerant to different ideas. So to start with, let us first have the Milesians. Again, bakit sila tinatawag na Milesians? Because they were the philosophers who evolved or who emerged from Miletus. Again, ang Miletus ay isang lugar or isang nayon na matatagpuan sa Greece. And who are they? They were Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. Anaximander, on the other hand, was considered as the student of Thales, while Anaximenes was a student of Anaximander. So they were related or connected to one another. What needs to be given emphasis here is that this first group of philosophers were the first thinkers who gave us a non-mythological account of the nature of reality and the universe without the aid of instruments, but rather by merely using their rational faculty together with their ability not only to observe but also to speculate. So ibig sabihin, nabigyang paliwanag nila ang pag-iral ng mga bagay-bagay sa paligid natin sa pamamagitan ng sarili nilang pag-iisip. Their rational faculty, their capacity or their ability to think, to observe, to speculate, and to scrutinize things around them. Besides, they were the first ones who tried to give a unifying and coherent explanation of the nature of reality. They were also considered as hylozoists, from the root word hylo or stuff and zoe or life. Why? Because they believe that the universe is alive or animate and material. This is from the doctrine that all matter has life. And for this reason, Thales, who was known as the father of Western philosophy, considered as one of the 7 sages or one of the wise men of ancient Greece, he believed that the lodestone or natural magnet is alive since it could make an object move. He also believed that the primary constituent of reality is no other than water. Moreover, Thales is also considered as the first philosopher to assume that the earth is flat. And like what we have mentioned a while ago, Thales brought geometry to ancient Greece, and therefore he is considered as a mathematician and an astronomer who successfully predicted an eclipse. So that was the contribution of Thales. Aside from his belief his belief that the ultimate substance of reality is water, he was also known in the doctrine or in his belief that the lodestone or natural magnet is alive. So para sa kanya, yung magnet daw na alam natin na nakapagpapagalaw ng mga bagay-bagay, para sa kanya ito ay may buhay. Para sa kanya ito ay buhay. Bakit? Sapagkat mayroon itong kakayanan na mapagalaw ang iba pang bagay. O, di ba, kapag inilalapit natin ang magnet sa mga bakal, inilalapat natin ito, halimbawa sa tanikala, ito ay gumagalaw. And therefore, according to Thales, lodestone or natural magnet is alive. At ano pang sabi niya? He assumed that the earth is flat. Why? Because, according to him, when you reach the edge of the horizon, you will fall. And that is only based on his observation. Next, Anaximander. Again, Anaximander is the student of Thales. He was a very good prose writer who claimed that the fundamental substance of reality is the infinite or the apeiron. He claimed that apeiron has no precise characteristics or attributes, meaning it is ageless and eternal, and it encompasses all the worlds. O take note ha, makikita natin papaano nag-i-emerge, papaano nagkakaroon ng pagbabago sa pag-iisip at paliwanag ng mga philosophers na ito. Sabi natin Anaximander was the student of Thales. But even though Anaximander was the student or was a student of Thales, he did not acknowledge the belief and the philosophy of Thales. Rather, he made his own philosophy. He made his own belief. Okay? So para sa kanya, it is not water, which is considered as the fundamental substance of reality, but rather, it is infinite. Para sa kanya, may pinagmumulan ang lahat ng bagay sa mundo. May pinanggagalingan. Ang bumubuo sa mundo ay hindi tubig. Para sa kanya, ito ay nagmumula dun sa tinatawag nating walang hanggan, or also known as the apeiron. And according to him, this conclusion about the infinite is highly speculative and abstract rather than based on observation. He also believed that the earth is cylindrical and is suspended in space. He is also the first philosopher who attempted to draw a map. So kita natin kahit siya ay estudyante ni Thales, pero sumalungat siya sa paniniwala at sa itinuro sa kanya ni Thales. So una, para sa kanya, the fundamental substance of the reality is no other than apeiron. Hindi tubig, kundi apeiron. Second, if Thales believed that the earth is flat, according to Anaximander, the earth is cylindrical and is suspended in space. And furthermore, he was able to draw, or he was able to attempt to draw a map. Let us now have Anaximenes. Tingnan natin, ano naman ang pinaglalaban ni Anaximenes. Anaximenes, on the other hand, concluded that the fundamental substance must be air. It should not be water, it should not be infinite or apeiron, but according to him, it must be air. According to him, air holds our soul together. It encompasses the whole world. Like Thales, he went back to the flat earth theory. But unlike Thales, take note, unlike Thales, who did not give an exact shape of the earth, this time around, Anaximenes gave a definite shape by claiming that the earth and other heavenly bodies, for that matter, are like saucers floating in air. Thus, according to him, the earth is flat and round. Okay, so nakita natin, this triumvirate, itong tatlo na ito, who were considered as Milesians, they were presocratic philosophers who gave their ideas, their insights, their explanations, and their own beliefs, not based on any tools or instruments, but rather based on their own rational faculty or their ability to think. Ito yung kanilang ipinapaliwanag. At sasabihin natin, ano ba naman yan? Anong kinalaman yan sa filosofiya? Anong saysay? Anong kahalagahan? Or anong ambag ni Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes sa evolution and emergence of philosophy? Wait, do not underestimate their contributions. Why? Because of those beliefs, because of those reasons, those explanations about the existence of the reality and existence of everything that is in the world, that begins philosophy. Or there where philosophy begins. Sa ganitong paraan, patuloy na nag-evolve, patuloy na nag-emerge yung tinatawag nating philosophy. Because they were the first philosophers who go against mythological explanations. Let us have another presocratic philosopher in the person of Maximus. Maximus used as well his observations and reasoning to provide causes for other natural phenomena on earth. So like for instance, he asserted that earthquakes were the result either of lack of moisture or superabundance of water. To him, lightning is caused by the violent separation of clouds by the wind. Also, that rainbows are formed when densely compressed air is touched by the sun. Aside from Maximus, we have also Pythagoras, who was known as the leader of religious cult known as Pythagoreans. He treated philosophy as a way of life, and according to him, philosophy and religion are connected and merged into one. He considered philosophy and mathematics as good for the purification of the soul. Moreover, he gave importance to the contemplation and contemplative life for this cathartic process of purification. And according to him, the primary constituent of reality would be numbers. So for him, anything could be explained through numbers. Kaya nga po, Pythagoras was known with the Pythagorean theorem. So yung ginagamit po ninyo sa mathematics na Pythagorean theorem, ang founder po noon ay walang iba kundi si Pythagoras. Moreover, he coined the word philosophy, and he was credited to be the first presocratic philosopher to use the term logos for his cosmology by trying to explain the nature of the universe through rational thought. Both Plato and Aristotle appreciated the importance of contemplation that Pythagoras emphasized. Thus, both philosophers gave importance to contemplation and contemplative life in their respective philosophies. After Pythagoras came Heraclitus. This was around 500 BC. He was known for the mystical nature of his philosophy, especially his idea about change. So he believed that the only thing that is permanent in this world is change, also known as flux or becoming. So yung very abused philosophy na ginagamit natin that there is no constant thing here on earth except change, the author of that is no other than Heraclitus. He was also known in his belief or in his saying that you cannot step twice into the same rivers, for fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you. We step and do not step into the same rivers, we are and are not. So, anong ibig sabihin yan? Para kay Heraclitus, napaka-imposible or hindi pwede na tayo ay umapak sa parehong daloy ng tubig sa ilog at the same time sa ikalawang pagkakataon. Bakit? Sapagkat para kay Heraclitus, yung unang pag-apak mo sa tubig ng ilog, hindi mo na yun mauulit pa sa ikalawa na katulad nung ginawa mo nung una. Bakit? Sapagkat ang tubig ng ilog ay buhay. Ito ay dumadaloy. Ito ay nagpapatuloy. Kaya nga sabi niya, we step and do not step into the same rivers. We are and are not. Sapagkat ilang beses man nating ulitin ang pag-apak natin sa parehong ilog na iyon, hindi ito magiging katulad ng una nating pag-apak. Sapagkat ang tubig ng ilog ay patuloy na dumadaloy. Okay? Then, another contributions of Heraclitus are, he was also considered as the first philosopher who wrote about the idea of change. And he viewed the world as always changing, which he likened to an ever-living fire. So para sa kanya, ang pagbabago ay patuloy na nagaganap sa mundo. Walang katapusan. From time to time, change exists. At ito ay katulad ng isang naglalagablab na apoy na kailanman ay hindi mo kayang pigilan, hindi mo kayang labanan sa pamamagitan lang ng sarili mong mga kamay. Gaano man kalakas ang iyong hininga or paghinga dun sa apoy na naglalagablab, hindi mo ito kayang pigtawin or hindi mo ito kayang tapusin sa pamamagitan lang ng sarili mong kakayanan. He also believed that this world, which is the same for all, no one of God's or man has made, but it was ever, is now, and ever shall be an ever-living fire with measure of its kindling and measures going out. So unlike Thales, unlike Anaximander, and Anaximenes or even Pythagoras, para sa kanya, ang mundong ito ay hindi pagmamay-ari ng sinuman. Hindi ito ginawa ng sinuman. But rather, para sa kanya, ang mundong ito ay isang daigdig ng naglalagablab na apoy na ang sukatan ay walang iba kundi yung kanyang lagablab na siyang lumalabas paulit-ulit at nag-spread all over the other spaces. Heraclitus also used the flames of fire to emphasize the idea of change. So just like the flames that constantly flicker, the world is always changing and you cannot hold on to it at any given point. So para sa kanya, hindi mo kaya or hindi mo kailangang panghawakan ang mundo. Bakit? Dahil ang mundo ay pabago-bago. So kahit yung salitang binibitawan sa'yo ng iyong kapwa, according to Heraclitus, yung sinabi mong oo ngayon, pwede yang mabago paglipas ng ilang sandali. Yung sinabi niya sa'yo na mahal ka niya ngayon, pwede yang mabago at pwede yang mawala. Maaring mamaya, bukas, sa ikalawa or sa mga susunod pang araw. Because according to Heraclitus, a world is full of changes. It is like the flames of fire that constantly flicker, and the world will always and ever changing. Now, his idea of change will later become an inspiration in the development of philosophical ideas all throughout the history of modern and contemporary thought. So, nagbigay ito ng inspirasyon sa pagkakaroon ng mas malawak na pananaw sa buhay, sapagkat ang tao ay nagkaroon ng isang pananaw na hindi nananatili lamang sa iisang kaalaman, but rather, a human person continues to learn, continues to speculate, to observe and scrutinize the things around him or around. Another philosopher aside from Heraclitus is no other than Parmenides. He was known to be the leader of the Eleatic school from southern Italy. And his philosophical idea is a contradiction of the idea of change from Heraclitus. So sumalungat siya sa philosophy, sa paniniwala nitong si Heraclitus. Bakit? He proposed that the only thing that is permanent in this world is being. That is reality made up of one continuous object or plenum called being. So, change for him is merely an illusion. So, ito'y bahagi lang ng ating ilusyon, kathang isip lamang. Amidst this illusion of change, there is something indestructible, immovable, complete, and without beginning or end, which he called being. Thus, for Parmenides, there is no such thing as change and motion. Another presocratic philosopher is no other than Empedocles. Empedocles was a very interesting figure among the roster of presocratic philosophers. Why? Because he believed himself to be immortal and that he had magical powers. He was known to have cured somebody who was comatose for 24 months. Kaya nga para sa kanya, meron siyang sariling kapangyarihan. Kasi kaya niyang magpagaling dahilan sa sarili niyang kakayanan. What makes Empedocles different from the rest of the presocratics is that he firmly believed that he was immortal. And you know, to prove this, ano ang kanyang ginawa? He leaped into the Mount Etna, an active volcano in southern Italy, and that led to his untimely death. So dahil sa pagnanais niyang mapatunayan sa lahat ng tao na siya ay makapangyarihan at hindi siya namamatay, naisipan niya na pumunta or umakyat sa tuktok or sa bunganga ng isang aktibong bulkan na matatagpuan sa southern Italy. Doon siya ay nagpatihulog, siya ay tumalon. At ito ang naging dahilan ng kanyang hindi inaasahang pagkamatay. So aside from that, Empedocles was also the proponent of the notion that reality is made up of the four elements. Kita nyo naman kung gaano kabangis itong si Empedocles. Kung si Thales ay naniniwala that the ultimate reality, the ultimate substance of reality is water, at yung mga sumunod sa kanya katulad ni Anaximander ay naniniwala that the ultimate substance of reality is apeiron or infinite, and so on and so forth, this Empedocles believed that the ultimate substance of reality is made up of four. So pinagsama-sama niya. The four elements, namely earth, air, fire, and water. So here, he is regarded as a pluralist because he had four elements as his fundamental substances, that reality is made of instead of only one substance. So take note, those philosophers who believe in just one element like Thales or Anaximenes, they are considered as monist. M-O-N-I-S-T-S. So pag singular, of course, walang S. Then, etong si Empedocles again, he was known or regarded as pluralist because he believed not only in one ultimate substance of reality, but four. Okay, so let us continue. Alam kong naguguluhan na kayo, nalilito dahil sa dami ng mga philosophers na ating inaaral ngayon. No po? So, but take note again, like what I have said before, they have that contributions to the emergence of philosophy. That is why we need to understand and we need to know some of their contributions. So let us have Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras believed that there is not just one element that reality is made of. As a matter of fact, for him, there are as many seeds or elements as there are kinds of things. So para sa kanya, kung ano ang dami ng bagay na umiiral sa mundo, ito rin yung dami ng kanyang pinagmumulan. So he does not believe in just one element or in just one ultimate substance of reality. Okay? So madami. Then, for him, matter becomes infinitely divisible. Whenever you divide matter, each separated part will contain elements of everything else. So those ultimate substance of reality, according to him, could not be divided. Another important contribution of Anaxagoras is his idea about the nous or the mind, which was conceived of as external but is infinite and is self-ruled, and according to him, has the greatest strength and power over all things. So para kay Anaxagoras, ang pinakamakapangyarihang bahagi ng katawan ng tao ay walang iba kundi ang kanyang pag-iisip. It has the greatest strength and power over all things. Anaxagoras would summarize his philosophy about reality and the nous in his philosophy that all things have a portion of everything, while nous is infinite and is self-ruled and is mixed with nothing, but it is alone. Itself by itself, it has knowledge about all things. So what does it mean? That the world of Anaxagoras is without any soul entails that nous is for him the ultimate reality, meaning it is not the end of our life, but the origin of the world and of ourselves. It is that which brings life, and at the same time, that which gives human beings the possibility of knowing anything whatsoever. In other words, mind is the purest of all entities, with a unique authenticity. It rules over all entities that have life, both greater and less. As the creative power, our mind controls the function and the activity of everything and puts all things in order, setting them in a continuous motion. So para kay Anaxagoras, walang ibang makapangyarihan maliban sa pag-iisip ng tao, sapagkat ang isip ng tao ang siyang naglalagay at siyang kumikilos sa lahat ng bagay na umiiral sa mundo. Besides, The importance of Anaxagoras' idea about the nous or the mind should not be underestimated. Why? Because for some scholars, they suggested that this may have been an inspiration for the conception of the characteristics of the Christian God, which was yet to be formalized as a doctrine at this early period. We had also another presocratic philosopher in the person of Zeno. He was known as a student and loyal follower of Parmenides at around 490 before Common Era. As expected, he would pronounce and reiterate the idea of Parmenides that reality is being, meaning that we are all interconnected. So he made a pronouncement that there is no motion at all. Okay? So para sa kanya, katulad ng pinaniniwalaan ng filosofiya na ipinahayag ni Parmenides that the ultimate substance of reality is no other than being, pinanghawakan din ito ni Zeno. But according to him, he believed that there is no motion at all. So walang pagkilos na nagaganap sa mundo. But all of us were interconnected. Then, we have also Leucippus and Democritus. They contributed their idea that the ultimate substance that reality is made of are no other than atoms. Atoms, which means inseparable or indivisible, must be the ultimate constituent of matter and has been accepted by the scientific community and later on was proven upon the discovery of the microscope as a tool for examining matter. Before we continue with our discussion, let us first try to summarize again this part of our discussion. So the pursuit of philosophy from the Western tradition could be summarized as the quest for knowledge for its own sake. When no one dared to go against tradition, it was the ancient philosophers who tried to offer an explanation because they wanted to search for answers and to quench their thirst in order to satisfy this general curiosity about the nature of reality. So, from Thales to Leucippus and Democritus, initially we had water, and after a while, there was the atom. Of course, let us not forget the emerging ideas in between, the apeiron or infinite of Anaximander, air of Anaximenes, numbers of Pythagoras, the idea of change from Heraclitus, the reality of being from Parmenides, the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water of Empedocles, and the infinite divisibility of Anaxagoras and his idea of the nous or the mind. Zeno's arguments against motion and the atoms of Leucippus and Democritus. This is quite an accomplishment for the emergence of philosophy in our modern times today. Now, let us talk about doing philosophy in the East and in the West. So, to complete our discussion regarding the beginning of doing philosophy, let us have now the similarities and the differences between the philosophy in the East and in the West. Western philosophy tends to make heavy use of logic, reason, and categorization. An idea is presented, reasons are given for believing in the idea, and then conclusions are made based on the idea. Breaks down ideas and tends to focus on the parts rather than the whole. marked the beginning of the process of searching for knowledge for its own sake. Man's rationality is the key to explain the order in the universe. While on the other hand, Eastern philosophy seems to have no dichotomy between the objective world and man as human beings. Has been associated with their religion. Philosophy and religion are one. Look at man as one with the world, and philosophy is. Let me give you the summary of the differences and similarities of Eastern and Western philosophies. The Eastern tradition in the practice of philosophy could be summarized as pursuit of a way of life. The Eastern tradition of philosophizing has been associated with their religion. For them, philosophy and religion are one. When they are doing their philosophy, they are also practicing their religion. There is no dichotomy or separation between man and the objective world. Let us now have the approaches in doing philosophy. How does one philosophize or do philosophy systematically? So the main approaches that we will be using or we will be discussing is no other than analytic and speculative philosophy. First, analytic or critical philosophy has two fundamental tasks. First, the analysis and definition of our fundamental concepts. So, pag-unawa, pagbibigay kahulugan sa kung ano ang pinapaksa ng pag-aaral, or ano ang bumubuo or anong konsepto ang bumubuo sa nais mong pag-aralan. Second, the clear and resolute criticism of our beliefs and assumptions in our daily life. So, ibig sabihin, under analytic or critical philosophy, you will try to criticize your own beliefs and your assumptions. Okay? Then, we have speculative or metaphysical philosophy, which tries to find an underlying explanation or general principle that could explain reality in its entirety. Meaning, it aims to reach some general conclusions as to the nature of the universe and as to our position and prospects in it. It is an attempt to think synoptically of all the facts, and the results might be trivial, but the process will remind us of the extreme complexity of the world. And that ends our lesson. Thank you very much for listening, and again, I hope you understand something in our today's lesson. So goodbye and thank you, and God bless you all.